I have never watched a single thing on Star Citizen. I know nothing about Star Citizen. I have no clue what I am talking about. This is a pure reaction, my first ever reaction to the game.
Chris Roberts, the head of Cloud Imperium Games and Star Citizen's father, released a letter from the chairman blog post yesterday, hyping up 2023 content for the game and providing impressive stats on player-based growth. But the post was also capped off with a quick mention of yet another delayed release date for one of the game's longest teased updates. Let's get into the meat of it.
That is one thing that I do know about Star Citizen, is that a lot of the times their updates take forever to come out. I remember one of my friends played it, and he told me that it took like an entire year for one update to come out, which is really bad for the health of the game.
Now, for the first part of the blog post, Chris spent some time talking about the new persistent entity streaming tech, which is Star Citizen's latest 3.18 upgrade, which is still being tested in the PTU. I did make a dedicated video on this new PTU build, but if you haven't seen it yet, in a nutshell, persistent entity streaming allows for all objects, spaceships, and dead bodies to persist in the Star Citizen universe more or less indefinitely, creating all kinds of new gameplay opportunities and, well, piles of trash. Chris also reiterate,
this is a really big issue if you're going to have it's a really big issue if you're going to have multiplayer servers, because this is a lot of lag right here. All it takes is one guy who wants to be that guy to just fuck everybody over, and it's done.
A cool statement saying, "I'm not aware of any other large-scale MMO that has tried to deliver this level of persistence."
Very true.
And I would back that up and say, not only have I never seen any other game attempt this at this scale, but nothing has even come remotely close to it.
I don't think any game has ever attempted this ever. I'm just not gonna lie. From what I do know about Star Citizen, it is massive, and what they promise on is stuff that no one would ever think of, or people would think of, but people really wouldn't think of, like, let me put this in a MMO.
Chris then gets into some really impressive stats regarding the game's growth, and I have to say it is crazy impressive and super encouraging for fans. There was over 1 million unique logins to the game servers in 2022, with over 46 million hours played. There were 800,000 new accounts created this year. Their daily active user count has grown 50% from the previous year, averaging 240,000 monthly active users.
So it sounds like a lot of people are coming into the game, a lot more people are getting the game, so the game is going to continue to grow until the devs basically kill their own game, which is really good for the game, honestly, especially a game that's had so many delays and setbacks.
Users with highs of 400,000 players. The game also blew past its previously highest earning year, bringing in over $100 million, most of which, according to the blog, is coming from new players, which I think is really interesting, and it gives perspective in that the game isn't just pulling in tons of cash from veteran fanboys trying to keep the project alive, but that most of the money coming in is from people just getting into the game for the first time. Also, the conversion rate for people trying the game for free and then deciding to buy it is at 70%, which is crazy impressive. This is a huge stat and really speaks to the fact that Star Citizen has been packing on a lot of fun content. I am honestly surprised by this metric because the learning curve in Star Citizen is pretty rough, but it probably means that most players see from the start that there's actually a real universe worth exploring and that they managed to push through the
I would also say that a lot of people don't really care about learning curves. I think a lot of people say, like, oh, well, the learning curves are difficult in this game, or the learning curves are difficult in this game over here, or that game over there. But in reality, like, people don't really care about a learning curve because we have the internet these days. If we didn't really have the internet and it was just, like, still very low end, like we were back in, you know, like 2006, then yeah, it might be an issue. But these days, it's like there's probably a guide on everything in the game. There's probably players that are willing to help you in the game. There's probably your friends that are willing to help you in the game. There's probably full-on Discord communities that are willing to help you in the game. So that's the really big thing, right? Like, we're not seeing players anymore just get discouraged because there's a hard learning curve in games these days. You still have a few people here and there, but for the most part, that has gone away.
The buggy or unintuitive learning experience. Now, of course, along with the stats, especially about the cash flow, Chris was quick to mention that all of this money coming in goes right back into the game. They moved into 2 new studios in 2022 and have been hiring like crazy. CIG ended the year with 861 employees, which is pretty nuts and probably very much needed to develop 2 games and the crazy tech that they run on. This whole section overall is super encouraging to me. There was, after all, long periods of this game's development where people had to realistically consider that.
I'm just gonna say, if the game actually looks like what we were seeing in the background, the game looks amazing. Like 100%, it looks amazing, and it probably feels pretty great too. The only issue that I do see is maybe if your PCs are a little lower end, they might have some issues on them, but I'm not 100% sure without being able to play the game, obviously.
That CIG could easily run out of money before the game was finished. But given the new metrics, especially how strong it's been in the previous years, it seems less and less likely. Now, Chris goes on to mention the Starcitizen dev fan meetups and that 2023 will be having its CitizenCon as an in-person event once again now that COVID restrictions are easing up. There's a bit more info about their new studios and that they're going to be doing studio tours and stuff like that. Then he also reiterated on what the latest 3.18 patch is bringing into the game. And then finally, we get to the road to alpha.
It feels like the devs are really informed on what the people want and what the people need for the game. So I think it's really good that the way that they're presenting it, because how they are presenting it is making it where everything feels like the fan base is included in the game, instead of just being like, yeah, well, we really don't need your guys' opinion because we're trying to make money, and if your thing might... Because we're trying to make money, and if your thing doesn't initially make us billions and billions of dollars, then you can fuck off.
Alpha 4.0. Now, the 4.0 update is supposed to bring us the holy grail Starcitizen tech that, once implemented, will open up the universe to multiple systems, improve performance, and increase the server population massively. Of course, to get that done, they have to first iron out the remaining bugs in patch 3.18 and get that to the live servers, which he states is planned to happen in January. I think that sounds pretty reasonable given the state of Wave 1 PTU, but then again, trying to anticipate major blockers is always a crapshoot. They then want to add some additional quality of life features to 3.18, such as the ability to pick your server shard and even queue for the shard that you want to play on. This is actually pretty important because the persistence tech allows you to do stuff like create hidden stockpiles of loot on some planet or somewhere in the verse, or even come back and find your old shipwreck from a previous life and reclaim some of your lost gear. The catch is that if you want...
Yeah, so that's definitely important for you to be able to play on a server then. If you can't play on a server and it's just going to randomly put you in a different server, the chances of losing loot are probably extremely high in those cases.
Want to do these things and see those items again, you need to relog into the same shard you were on before, so getting the ability to do that actually means a lot. This of course won't be as important once server meshing is in the game and players will be able to play on the same shard most of the time, but it is a good short-term feature that'll allow for full testing of persistence tech. After they get this stuff in, well, the devs are basically on a tech march towards 4.0, with one of the first major tech steps being the separating of the replication layer from the game's server. There's some interesting details about this in the post, but a cool takeaway is the allegedly improved...
From what I can see from the game so far, it essentially looks like an Outer Worlds, but actually works. Like that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like they made a Outer Worlds game that actually works.
Stability around server crashes, allowing for potentially seamless transitions from a crashing server to a new one. It sounds pretty cool, and this will essentially come with the full upgrade to true server meshing, allowing the current universe to be divided up into multiple servers to reduce load and improve performance. Chris then says, at this point, we should be able to handle tens of thousands of players all playing in the same persistent shard. Now, this is a pretty massive statement, especially considering that they're aiming to bring that...
That means that this game works better than most MMOs. And if that is the case, then it 100% works better than most MMOs that are out these days, especially since people consider an MMO something that has 12 players or less on a server. As long as it's more than one, they consider it an MMO. So this is actually really big. It's something that not even New World can really get down. I think Lost Ark got it down pretty well, but seeing it in a game that's really high tech, really advanced, has a lot of graphics, has a lot of different things going inside of the game, I think is like really insane.
Potentially in 2023, that would be basically increasing the server size from 100 players to, well, tens of thousands of players. Assuming Chris isn't just making up numbers here, since tens of thousands is a pretty vague ballpark. Even 10,000 players would be a server size increase of 100-fold of what we currently have. Something tells me that they may have to start increasing the number of.
If I had a good feeling about what the server size is probably going to be, is they will probably make 2 US servers, and it'll be US East or US West, more than likely, and then each server will probably be able to hold anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000 in between there. If we're going to be realistic, we can give it the benefit of the doubt, and we'll say 80,000 people per server, and it'll just be chilling. That's probably what they're going to aim for, probably around 80,000, but we could 100% see 50 if they really desire to put it at 50. But if they do 50, they might need to make more servers depending on how many people are obviously playing the game. And I think it's good. I think that's a good way to do it. They could make servers that can hold up to 50 to 80,000 players each, and then make it where there's 2 for each different region. So you could do 2 in US East, 2 in US West, 2 in EU, 2 in Asia, and like so on and so forth until they get all of them down properly.
Of hangars and landing bays at the major landing zones around the system. Wow, 10,000 players might work well when spread across, say, 20 different systems. Well, we're only going to have 2 systems when this tech comes, so it might get a bit crowded. Now here's where the real gut punch of the blog post comes in. Tactically inserted toward the end, and I quote, "We are aiming to put static server meshing and Pyro into the hands of players in the 4th quarter of 2023. Now, for anyone who's been following the game and perhaps drooled over the previous letter from the chairman back in May of 2022, about 7 months back that is, Chris said this: "Our current goal is to introduce server meshing in 4.0 as an early technical preview to Evocati testers in the PTU at the end of Q4 this year. That would mean Pyro when server meshing, well..."
I think what they're doing for this game is very intelligent. They're basically allowing all the players to be their test bunnies, so that way they can figure out all the kinks and figure out what's good and what's bad about the game before they officially say, hey, the game is actually out, because they're still technically saying the game is an alpha/beta, making it where when they release content for the game, it's not as difficult as it would have been for them to release it if it wasn't an alpha/beta.
Well, basically now, at least for early testers. This was the estimate given by Chris about 7 months back, and now it's being pushed out potentially another 12 months. Now, in Chris's defense...
Well, yeah, when you basically start promising that you're going to have over 10,000 players on a server, plus on top of that you're going to be able to have server meshing and static servers, yeah, obviously it's going to be really difficult for them to get out, and I think giving them that extended time frame is really important. Now, if they just were going to add that and that alone, and then they were like, oh, well, sorry, it's going to take like another 2 years, then yeah, there'd end up being an issue, because at that point you're like, dude, well, why is it taking so long? But when they plan on adding like 10 different things at the same time, then yeah, you can give them the benefit of the doubt and basically say, okay, I kind of get why this is taking forever, because you guys actually have a lot of plans and you're not just like sitting there being like, oh, we gotta add a skin into the game that makes some money.
He did inject a lot of provided that the persistent tech testing goes well and the deadlines are met type of statements in his previous letter from the chairman, so he did technically cover his butt. That said, it's still a massive underestimation on how long it was going to take them to implement this new tech, especially when the original estimate was basically 7 more months. All that said, if you're a fan of Starcitizen, this delay is...
Well, a big thing is when you're adding new tech to a game, you have to think of the other tech that you need before that, right? So they were probably like, yeah, we want to add this tech to the game. And then they were probably in a meeting and they were probably talking about server expansions, right? And when they were talking about server expansions, they're probably like, okay, well, we need to do server expansions and get the servers up to date where they can hold that many players before we start working on the static thing. And so that's probably what they've been working on the entire time, is making sure that their servers can hold that many people without it lagging and without the servers just crashing. So that way the static thing will come out like a month or 2 after, and it will go into the servers perfectly fine. Where if they do the static thing first, then updating the servers to where they can hold a bunch of people will be 10 times harder.
Is definitely on the smaller side of things and doesn't even compare to the comically overshot release dates for the games, so I guess shame on me for getting my hopes up in this case, I suppose. Also, I should mention that the new Q4 2023 release date for 4.0 comes again with the same caveat that this is extremely complicated engineering work, which makes it incredibly difficult to predict development time.
Yeah,
so
it is.
it's entirely possible, and some might even say likely, that they will miss.
The big thing for it is the same thing that we're seeing with Dune Awakening, right? They're trying to make something that we've never seen before. So it's not like they're just coming out with the same MMO and it's like, oh, this is World of Warcraft, but in space this time. It's not like that. They're trying to do something no one else has ever... they're trying to do something that no one else has ever done in the existence of MMOs, or really the existence of gaming, where they make something that feels multi-universal and multi-planal, so that way something that feels multi-universal and has something that, let me reset my brain, something that is multi-universal and something that has multiple planes, so that way they are able to essentially make one of the greatest games ever created.
This release window as well. And of all of the updates and tech in Starcitizen, the 4.0 update is by far the most impactful and exciting. It's not just bringing a new star system, but an entirely...
I think also as they progress over the years, they're going to keep adding more and more stuff to the alpha/beta, and the reason for that is... Fuck, man, I keep losing my train of thought. So the reason that... The reason for that is because as the technology advances, then they can see more advanced stuff going into the game. Because it probably started off as just like a cool idea, and then that cool idea turned into like actual working on the game, and then that working on the game turned into a trailer, and then that trailer turned into a little bit gameplay, and then like it just went up and up and up from there. That's usually how it works. So yeah, obviously over the years, it's going to take time, especially as technology advances in the real world. As technology advances in the real world, then also the game should be advancing with it, especially a super futuristic game.
New backend server system, potentially a massive player count increase, and countless other benefits. Seeing it get delayed, then delayed, delayed again, and then delayed again is hard to weather for any fan. But I am, of course, sticking around to weather it. The silver lining for 2023 is that other extremely cool features will still be launching before 4.0 and server meshing. Chris mentions the item resource system, which I think he's referring to the resource management system, basically a very in-depth system for how substations and systems on ships and outposts will function, requiring maintenance, repair, and even intentional disabling.
I really love all the graphics, and I love all the little things, because it feels like this is stuff that actually happens in the game, and it doesn't feel like this is just cutscenes. It feels like you actually land your ship like this, you actually walk out like that, you actually see the grass moving when you walk out of the ship, and I just love that when you see game trailers or game reactions that have that type of stuff in it.
Tampering to benefit in combat situations. It's super cool stuff and a huge upgrade to multi-crew gameplay. Bounty hunting will get full tracking systems and the ability to restrain and transport bounties, which actually sounds awesome. They're adding persistent hangars with freight elevators, allowing you to call up stored inventory or place things into storage. Personally, I think persistent hangars is a massively underhyped feature.
I don't know if this is correct or not, but I think my friend told me he put like $300 into this game. I think this game can be very, very expensive to use, if I remember correctly, because you can buy a bunch of stuff from the market that allows you to get like ship upgrades and things of that sort. So I think you can spend like thousands and thousands of dollars into this game to like progress as of current day. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that is what I remember from what I was told.
As these hangars are intended to become basically your new hab units with customization options and potentially the ability to have a ton of your own ships parked and ready to go at a moment's notice. There's still a lot of unknowns, but it sounds cool and like a potentially big quality of life upgrade as well. Chris then states that toward the end of the year, which I'm going to assume means pre 4.0, that we're going to see some of the features that have been developed in Squadron 42 come over to the persistent universe, such as the improved player traversal that that we saw at CitizenCon, the improved interaction system, FPS scanning, the new star map, MFDs using the new building block UI, and much deeper combat AI.
Okay.
The brand new Gen 12 render engine is also expected to see many performance improvements and the addition of Vulkan API. And obviously all of this is huge and will massively improve the game in so many ways. The star map in particular is like the #1 most requested feature upgrade, so if we get that in 2023, that'll be pretty great for pretty much everyone. He also mentions that there's more features coming which aren't mentioned in the blog post, and we'll probably just have to wait for the February roadmap to get a better idea on the timeline for every single thing coming in 2023. Now, the community reaction is of course focused on the delay for Pyro and 4.
All right, this is what I'm going to say about the community reaction. It's dumb. Plain and simple. It is. You're complaining that the game is getting held back because the devs realize that there is a issue with the game. It's dumb. It doesn't matter. There's no like opinion on it. It is. You're basically complaining that they're not putting out broken content. Just saying.
Many are predicting Pyro in 2024, which honestly seems like a pretty safe bet at this point. I think what's interesting with Starcitizen, which is becoming more apparent in the recent years, and especially with 3.18 Wave 1, is that the added features and systems are bringing a ton of new gameplay opportunities that carry a lot of weight with them. So despite some of the biggest tech in the second star system getting delayed yet again, there are still a lot of really meaningful upgrades that are going to flesh out gameplay loops. It seems like even if 2023 doesn't bring Pyro and server meshing, which of course I hope it does, that at least the other upgrades may really evolve the player experience in significant ways. Seeing that roadmap in February will be exciting, as it's going to give us a lot more details about specifically what's planned. Aside from the star map, my next biggest feature request is the new flight modes. Chris didn't mention.
The flight modes kind of remind me of that Star Wars game that came out a while back that was like the TIE fighters and the it reminds me of the Star Wars game where like the TIE fighters and bro, I'm trying to find the wording. The flying in this game kind of reminds me of the Star Wars game that came out that has... Bro, I keep losing my train of thought. Fuck, man. The flight combat in this game reminds me of the Star Wars game that came out a little while back that was like squadrons or something like that, where you would fight starships one-on-one, or you could do team battles. And I think that's actually really cool. I think that was a really advanced system, but a lot of people didn't end up playing the game because other games obviously came out at the same time, or some people just didn't really think that a Star Wars game was going to be worth it. But I think as overall, that game was a really good like building block for games like this.
It in the blog post, and I know it's a huge amount of work to port over from Squadron 42, is they basically need to add it to like over 100 ships individually.
This is cool.
Each with custom flight tuning, but I do really want this game to finalize its flight and combat design so that the player base can test it, refine it, and make it fantastic. Anyway, there's a ton of information here. Those are my kind of main takeaways from the blog post, but I'd be curious to hear what your takeaways are and what you want to see most in 2023 for Starcitizen, aside from the obvious 4.0 update. Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't seen my 3.18 coverage yet, check out this video here.
So the game overall looks really good, and honestly, the game overall looks really good and looks very clean. Yeah, I think the graphics look good, the flying looks good. I think that the brush looks really good. If they deliver on their promises, it has a lot of potential in the game. I know that the game has been held back and that there is some issues with the game, but I think that's just a sign that the devs actually care and they're not willing to just release content just because the community cries about it. And I think that's really important for the devs to do, because if they're able to do that and they're able to hold back the community from crying about little things like that, I think it will overall be better for the game in the long run. Yes, it is annoying that it doesn't come out immediately, but at the same time, I would prefer that a game comes out with brand new content that works immaculate instead of it coming out with brand new content that barely works and is half broken, making more players go away from the game.